Hello, this is Opening Dharma Access Podcast. Welcome to our wrap-up compilation of all the guests we had on for Season 3, highlighting Asian American and Asian Diaspora Buddhist voices. Opening Dharma Access Podcast was created by Reverend Liên Shutt and is co-hosted by Dana Takagi. I'm Eunji Son, behind-the-scenes editor and assistant to the podcast. Every one of these amazing guests featured in this compilation episode has a full-length interview available for you to listen to. Find links to these episodes in the show notes or go to accesstozen.org/podcast or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Now, please enjoy.
Opening Dharma Access, or ODA, is forwarding Asian Diaspora Buddhist practitioners this season.
So we've been talking about this idea of the disquiet. We started to talk about the ways in which the Asian American experience is very distinctive, particularly in convert Buddhist sanghas, but also trying to kind of lift up what the nature of that experience is.
It's very much a sense of the suppression or the stereotyping or the pigeonholing of Asian diaspora or Asian Americans. And so this season, we're really bringing forward the Asian diaspora Buddhist experience to say for ourselves, to clarify for ourselves what that is. In a way, we're defining as we bring in our guests, and each of us get to define what that is for ourselves and our experience as practitioners of Buddhism in North America.
Asian American and Buddhism can both be categories or fields, if you will, with the potential for liberation. And so for myself, that's how I like to approach both of those. And I like to think about ways that we can take our categories, so Asian American in this instance, and see if there's ways we can make them more inclusive or more liberatory. There's ways in which our categories can actually do harm or feel limiting. And as much as possible, I think it's our creative work and as kind of dharmic work and liberatory work to change definitions or make something freeing.
Coming from being sort of mired in very ivory tower intellectual approaches to what it means to be Asian American, Sri Lankan American, a lot of my focus was on trauma and intergenerational trauma. Right. So coming from that, like I personally had sort of let's talk about like what it means to be racialized and things. And so some of the things that we heard from folks was like, we don't want to hear about the trauma of being Asian American. We already live the trauma of being Asian American, but we have these like very rich communities, these very rich histories. Yes, like being a racialized person of color it's difficult, but it can't be what all of the stories are about. So while we will address, serious issues like that, having that in the back of our head, it's like, oh, we're looking at everything about what it means to be Asian American Buddhist.
I have great respect for my family members, and we all have our own religious paths and spiritual paths. The beauty of Buddhism is that it has so many different entry points. I'm not going to have a deep doctrinal discussion with family members, but we can talk about the value of slowing our lives. And in terms of merging a Sangha family with my own family, my mom, who is otherwise a very devout Catholic, always comes to the temple on the days when I give the Dharma message. As an immigrant woman, as a woman of color who has often defied expectations, who has had to chart paths that are completely brand new to her, I think that might have imbued in her compassion and support for this unexpected path that I've taken.
why my mom could have transmitted Buddhist teachings to me and be totally unaware that she was doing so. Because she didn't have the vocabulary. She didn't have the concepts. She just knew how you're supposed to do things. How do women transmit the Dharma? I'm taking on the most misogynist looking sutra passages, ritualized practices in the tradition, and seeing if there's a way you could apply the liberating Dharma to them and be liberated, even if the sutra taken at face value generates suffering. Especially Buddhist studies in the West is a male monastic elite perspective on the tradition.
I've never been interested in transcending my body, but rather accepting it as this Asian American female identified body, because it's been the object of so much of the public gaze for so long. And I'm not ever willing to get rid of the identifying markers of this Asian American body of mine, because it's been such a struggle to inhabit it. You know, there's so many different ways that Asian American bodies have had meaning imposed on them. And for myself as a woman, as either hypersexual or hyper invisible, hyper visible, hyper invisible. And then during COVID, being an Asian American woman was even that much more scary. I feel like the Asian American Buddhist communities that I'm part of, we're tired of the silence around these struggles. There's noble silence, and then there's ignoble silence, the kind of silence that's deadening. I felt like with the Asian American Buddhists, especially the women, that we're not invisible, we're not silent. And so it's been really exciting for me to engage in these dialogues with other Asian American Buddhists who recognize that silence is not the way.
Looking back to both 2021, May We Gather, and 2024, I feel like the ceremonies kind of mirrored what temple services were like in the span of COVID and then like the post-pandemic period, where with 2021, it was like really, for a lot of temples, they weren't really able to have service unless it was live streamed. And so that was a main way of convening with people. And that's how our ceremony took place. And it was, I think, impactful because there was such a need with everything that was going on with the anti-Asian violence and the temples being vandalized, as mentioned earlier, and people feeling isolated. So that kind of live stream ceremony gathering surface in that way because of these greater conditions and meeting the conditions and being able to happen because of these larger, I believe, karmic conditions.
Yes, I've changed my name to honor my heritage, so I go by Bohi Moon now, and that's been a part of my reclamation of my heritage and also just a deeper connection to my roots and been very important to me.
Growing up, I was very consciously aware of my family. My grandfather was the first Chinese American judge in the continental United States, and my grandmother was a co-founder of the first library in Los Angeles, Chinatown. They're both extremely active in their communities. And my dad and all his siblings inherited that love for community and for making change. So they all became political, and they all were interested in culture and the arts. Yeah, both my parents are very public, extroverted people, and they're deeply tied to a lot of the political communities in Los Angeles. A lot of people say this about coming to Zen as adults, which is, in some ways, it's completely different from what I thought I would be doing. I would never guessed I would be doing this when I was in college or before. And then in other ways, I'm just doing the exact same thing as my parents. I'm in a place where I'm building community. I'm in a place where I'm oriented around liberation. I'm in a place where I am trying to take what was inherited and pass it on. I feel very present with my parents and my grandparents, even though the kind of external manifestation of it is very different than they would have guessed for me.
Climate justice issue requires an awakening in each and every one of us to see against, not just blindly go with our beliefs, go with an idea of understanding the suffering in the truest sense. Okay, bring your heart. Don't be, at least I'm telling myself, don't be aggressive in terms of you need to fix it or you need to solve it right away. Yes, that will come, but cultivate your heart. Be in the situations where one can be of value. And that is what I keep coming back to in my reflections and contemplation.
A lot of inside dialogue, you would start with just learning about one guideline at a time. So you spend the whole hour and a half just pausing and learning to understand and to have a felt embodied sense of what pause feels like, what that means. So oftentimes you might start off with the teacher will guide you in a sit initially. So just internally settling into pause. Let's say we're just doing pause, just settling to pause. And that's it. Just settling to pause. Again, what's notice? Waking up sati, mindfulness. And then the teacher will offer a little talk, maybe a short dharmet on, the use of pause. Maybe let's say the sutta instruction from the Buddha offering instructions to his son Rahula. Remember to pause while you're speaking, during or after, or pause before an action, reflect what you're about to do, during it, while you're doing it, reflect afterwards.
In Japanese, we have the word goen. The word in come from Akike Samufa, like we are linked, to each other, and that we have these encounters even that are from, various mysterious karmic circumstances brings us together. And for me, this Maybe Gather event is kind of like that we try to create an occasion where people can come together, people maybe who don't normally even get together. And I think sometimes those of us in Japanese lineage, we tend to stick just to each other. And in Little Tokyo, we often have things with other Nichens, Shingon, Nishi, Higashioga, etc. But we don't necessarily do things with Chinese American Buddhist people, Thai Buddhist people, American people, like Vietnamese American people. So I feel that this is a good opportunity to make these kind of linkages that are a little bit maybe not in our typical temple life.
So if we are now going to be virtual sanghas, what does it mean to sit with the computer? When I did a in-person practice, I was so moved by seeing people bow to their cushion, because the cushion literally supports, it's the platform for the zazen, for the sitting. And so we acknowledge its role in allowing us to focus and to concentrate in ways we couldn't otherwise. So I think that idea of the platform really extends to what we are using to support our practice in any situation. What would it mean to feel grateful to those who assembled the computer, or to those who maintain it for us, or those who risk their lives to get the network to work when the weather's bad, or those who maintain and design the internet, the parts that help us get connected. So when we do gatas for meals, there's a real effort to acknowledge the unseen labor that went into letting us have this food. So honoring the non-sentient when it interfaces with us as sentient beings to allow us to do something that we couldn't otherwise do.
We want to hear about joy. We want to hear about Asian American joy. And I'm like, well, yeah, we should. That too is our lived experience, right? That too is part of who we are as a community. People want to hear, yes, those deep, meaningful discussions about sutras, yes, but also to have lighter things.